In the early morning hours of March 13th, 1964, Kitty Genovese parked her car and began walking down the street towards her apartment in Queens. She heard footsteps approaching behind her, and she began to run. She didn't get far before the man caught her and stabbed her in the back. She screamed for help, waking the neighbors, one of whom yelled out the window and scared her attacker away. It was a close call, and had someone gone out to help Kitty, she likely would have lived to tell the tale. But this is an entirely different story. I'm Marina. With me, I have my two best friends, Colby and Laura, and this is Grim. All right, guys. So this week we are covering a very solved case, the murder of Kitty Genovese. So you're welcome to all of those who, like myself, are frustrated by unsolved cases. And sorry for those who are like Colby, who are going to boo because it's solved.
Because it's solved, yeah.
Yeah, it happens. So to prepare for this case, I just wanted to note that I did read a book, and there's a ton of books on this, but the book that I read was Kitty Genovese, The Murder, the Bystanders, The Crime That Changed America by Kevin Cook. And I also watched a documentary that's called The Witness, and that was a documentary involving Kitty's brother, Bill. And then I read various articles and whatnot to piece it all together, but I did want to give credit to those sources because they were big ones. So we'll just jump right in unless anybody has anything they want to talk about.
I know Colby already has questions.
Yeah, I already had questions. With that opening, I thought, like, did I like pass out for a second? Because you said people heard the attacker, heard her scream for help, and then in the next second, like, I blinked and we were like, she would have survived. So
yeah.
I was thinking that something good was going to happen here. But
did you forget what podcast we do?
Yeah, sometimes I think I forget where I am.
I do. That's happened a couple times where it's been like you're telling this great story about these nice people, and then I'm like, oh.
And they live happily ever after.
Yeah.
Until a very specific date on at a very specific time.
Yes.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Kitty dies.
All right. No. I haven't heard of this. So you said this is like a pretty well-known case, like nationally this would be well-known?
Yes. So I'm actually really excited because I learned about this case. I want to say it was an undergrad for the first time. I feel like we might have discussed it in law school as well, but I want to say I probably covered it in a sociology class. And it's so fascinating to me because I'm remembering the things about the case that are wrong. Like I went into this being like, oh, I want to cover this case because this is what happened. Oh. And then when I went back, I was like, oh, that's actually wrong.
Okay.
And that's like part of the that's part of what makes it so interesting is that even though the thing that I read probably explained that all of those things were wrong, the thing that stuck with me is the thing that was incorrect. And I think that's probably true.
Interesting.
I think that's why this case has been so infamous is because there's been a lot of incorrect information surrounding it that has made it almost more interesting than it really is, but it is still very interesting. So
I am your pupil.
One more question. Is it interesting?
So it's a really interesting case, and there's interesting things and interesting theories.
Interesting.
And we're going to talk about them right now.
Okay, great.
So Catherine Susan Genovese, a.k.a. Kitty, was born on July 7th, 1935 to Vincent and Rachel Genovese, who were both Italian Americans. Vincent ran Bay Ridge Coat and Apron Supply Company, so he supplied aprons for restaurants, and Rachel was a homemaker. Kitty grew up with her family in a brownstone at St. John's Place in Brooklyn, New York, and she was the oldest of 5 children. She had 3 brothers, Vincent, William, and Francis, and a sister, Susan. So Kitty was a very well-liked person. She was talkative and popular in school. She did well academically, earning A's and B's. She went to Prospect Heights High, which was an all-girl high school, and there were 23 out of 712 seniors that were named class celebrities, and she was one of them. And she was also named Class Cut Up, which is the 1960s version of Class Clown.
But okay.
Yeah. So basically, one of her friends from high school said that Kitty was the it person, and it was a privilege and an honor to be part of her clique. Aww. She just was very well liked, and she loved New York. And so she was very unhappy in 1954 when her family decided to move to New Canaan, Connecticut. Her mother had witnessed a murder on the street, and her and her father wanted to move somewhere safer. But Kitty didn't want to go. She loved the city. She felt free. She said she'd get a safe job in a safe neighborhood and they could stay in touch. She said she would go visit them in New Canaan and take the train. And they said, okay, you can stay. You can stay.
How old was she at this point?
She had graduated high school.
Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right.
So she was 18. A small tidbit of information. There isn't really a lot of information on this, but around that same time, Kitty was engaged to a man named Rocco, and the two were married in October 1954. The marriage didn't last long, and the two divorced in 1956. Kitty's brother actually contacted Rocco to ask about Kitty's life in New York. You know, he wanted to get more information because they didn't know much about her life after they moved to Connecticut and she stayed in New York. And Rocco said that their relationship would forever remain a mystery. So, a little bizarre.
Interesting. So she just had this very, very private relationship and they didn't know him at all?
I don't know if the family didn't know him, but they just didn't know about their life in New York.
Yep.
But it's unclear to me whether Kitty was bisexual or a lesbian, but the rest of her relationships talked about in the books and documentaries that I looked at are with women.
Okay.
So it's not that surprising to me that she had a marriage to a man that ended in divorce.
Fair.
Right.
Yep.
And going off of that, just for a bit of background, because we're talking about 60 years ago, in 1963, homosexuality was illegal under the sodomy laws of every state but Illinois. Cross-dressing was also against the law. And this was all 5 years before the Stonewall riots. Under New York law, a bar could lose its liquor license for serving a drink to a homosexual. And same-sex dancing and kissing and cross-dressing were all considered disorderly conduct. So there were underground clubs and bars that were run by organized crime, and they paid off police in order to stay in business. So the gay scene was very secretive during this time, and I think it's possible that Kitty was trying to either hide her true self or just trying to fit in or whatever the case may be. But I thought it was really important to sort of highlight how it was because I can't even fathom that time. Like, that's just not the time that we're currently living in. So
thank God.
Amen, sister. So after Kitty's family moved to New Canaan, Kitty stayed in an extra room in her grandfather's apartment until she saved enough to rent an apartment of her own. She worked as a secretary at an insurance company, then a waitress, then a hostess at an Italian restaurant, and then a bartender at a pub in Queens. People said she was just the best bartender. We know she was very well liked in high school. She had a great personality. They said that she was the type of bartender that she could go up to someone and cut them off and still get a good tip at the end of the night. Wow. So she just had a way about her.
That's a skill.
It is a skill. So just a really great person. Now, one of the most famous photos of Kitty that actually is the cover photo on the book that I was reading on Kindle, it's her mugshot. What? Which I did not know that. Yeah, in the picture you actually can see like a little string near her collar, and that's to hold the placard for her mugshot. But so in 1961, Kitty was tending a bar at a place called Queen's Cafe. Her girlfriend at the time, Dee, worked at another nearby bar. And there was an undercover cop who went by Wally who came in and asked Dee if he could place a bet on a horse race. Dee took his money as a favor and called Kitty, who liked to place bets on horses just for fun. She wrote it down and said, if the guy comes in, I'll do it. If not, whatever. So Wally later went to Queen's Cafe and arrested Kitty. He called her over and said, we know all about you and your betting. We know exactly what you're doing. He accused her of being part of this large gambling operation. The cops thought she was part of the Genovese crime family that was involved with running numbers. She got annoyed with them and said, yeah, that's right. I take in thousands a day and I get 5%. And then they arrested her.
She's like, no, I was just kidding. Can't you tell by where I'm working right now?
Seriously. Yes. So she was annoyed, but then as her court date approached, she got very nervous. She was taking it very seriously because she didn't have a criminal record. She was arrested and charged with operating an illegal gambling enterprise. Her and her girlfriend at the time were convicted and fined $50, which is about $475 in today's money, which not that serious, but again, it was
Still
a conviction. Mm-hmm. So Kitty lost her job at the Queen's Cafe and went to work for Ev's 11th hour, which is where she worked until she died.
At the ripe old age of 99, right?
Yes, correct.
In her sleep of natural causes.
Correct. Except not. So this is in 1963. So this is 2 years after her arrest. Kitty was working as a bar manager at Ev's. She was working 2 shifts a day. Typically worked the day shift from 9 to 6. I think as a bartender, and then she also helped with the books as a bar manager. And it was around that time that she met her girlfriend, Mary Ann Zelanko. So March 13th, Kitty met Mary Ann at one of the underground clubs called the Swing Rendezvous, which the cops called a girl bar. Kitty used the pickup line, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Mary Ann said she had heard better pickup lines, but Kitty was a looker, so she went with it. They danced and had drinks together. At some point, Kitty slipped into the crowd, and Mary Ann lost her, and she was disappointed because they didn't really exchange information. 4 days later, on March 17th, Mary Ann came home to a note on her door that said, "I'll call you at 7, the phone across the street." It was Kitty. She called her, and they agreed to meet at a club called the 7 Steps, and they spent the night together, and by the morning, they knew they wanted to live together.
This is so romantic, but now I'm thinking like present day. One, if you even met somebody in real life, because you're probably meeting them on a dating app where you're swiping to get to them. But like things were just so much more romantic. Like a random letter, you would think it was a stalker right now if you came home and it was like, pick up this phone at 7 p.m. tomorrow. You'd be like, I'm gonna die today. Today's when I die.
That's when you hear 7 days.
yeah, exactly. That's when Samara comes for you.
Guys, don't talk about her.
This was like, this is just so cute. Okay,
It is, and I think that basically when they were talking at the Swing Rendezvous, I think Mary Ann said, where she lived, basically.
Okay.
And Kitty found her, which again, like nowadays, that's like a super stalker move, but it was like so romantic.
It's so cute.
I think, and it's like a love at first sight sort of thing. It's like a week later, they're ready to move in together. They lived in a motel room for 2 weeks before they found a 1-bedroom on Austin Street in Kew Gardens, next door to the Long Island Railroad Station. Kew Gardens was a safe neighborhood. People left their doors unlocked. Parents let their kids play outside. There hadn't been a murder in years. And a cop said the usual complaints were kids knocking over trash cans. The apartment was one of 14 in a 2-story faux Tudor building. So it looked like it was like that white and brown that you'd see in like Switzerland. There were businesses on the bottom, apartments on top. There was a laundromat, a bookstore, a coffee shop, a TV radio shop, a liquor store, a pharmacy, and at the southeast end, there was a pub.
Everything you need.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I want to live there.
So the
Kew Gardens?
Kew Gardens.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We may want to wait before we put it in our applications, I think.
Sounds like there might be an apartment that's discounted, yeah.
One may be available.
One may be available. If I travel back to the 60s when this happened.
Correct. So Kew Gardens was quiet, basically, except for Bailey's Pub, which was open until 4 a.m. most nights. As you would expect with a bar, there was often music and arguments that could be heard in the apartments. And there was also a large apartment building across the street called Mowbray Apartments. And there were fights outside the bar, mostly yelling matches, and the neighbors learned to ignore it. And they would also hear, sort of domestic disputes. They'd see a man and a woman. They'd assume, husband, wife, or domestic, and they would, turn a blind eye because that's what you did in the 60s.
Oh, I feel like this is an important piece of information.
It's just information. I'm just giving you information.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, other than Bailey's Pub, the neighborhood was quiet and perfect. So Mary Ann and Kitty moved into Kew Gardens and were very happy together there. They had disagreements, sometimes like any couple, and I had to include this because I know that you guys will appreciate Kitty as a human being more with this grim fact. After one fight that Kitty and Mary Ann had, Kitty went and bought Mary Ann a dog to apologize.
Oh,
and they
Kitty.
named him Andrew.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, apology, Andrew.
Yes. So I just felt like, somebody that buys an apology dog, I just felt like you guys would really relate to her.
I would accept that.
Yes. You would accept a dog
Yes.
as an apology? Marianne used to visit Kitty's family in New Canaan with her, but Kitty's family assumed they were just roommates, or they knew and ignored it because, again, it was the 60s. Kitty's father would ask her when she was going to settle down with a man, and Kitty's response was basically that she was making good money and didn't need a man.
I like
Go
it.
Kitty.
And Kitty was making good money, and she was saving up and wanted to open an Italian restaurant, which she obviously never got the chance to do. So, let's talk about what happened. The night of the murder, Marianne was working at a nightclub called Club Chris. She finished her shift, had dinner, went bowling with a friend, and then went home to her and Kitty's apartment. Marianne read for a while and then went to bed around 11:30. Kitty was working that night at Ev's. The crowd died down around midnight, but the owner liked the bar to stay open until around 3 or 4. Kitty went to get dinner with one of the regulars. I too often eat dinner around midnight, 1 o'clock. Yeah. She returned before 3 and told the bartender he could close for the night, and she headed home. So now we are talking about the early morning hours of Friday the 13th.
Oh, never a good day.
No.
This is a particularly bad day. So the night of Kitty's murder, between 1:30 and 2 a.m., a man named Winston Mosley was out driving through the city hunting. Around 3 a.m., he was thinking about turning back home and was ready to do so when he noticed Kitty get into her red Fiat, and he followed her home. If Kitty had closed the bar earlier or worked later or ate dinner slower, she might still be alive. Winston watched Kitty park at the Long Island Railroad station, and he parked his car at a bus stop half a block up. He pulled on a stocking cap and hurried towards the railroad lot after her. Kitty locked her car and began walking to her apartment. The local drugstore and coffee store had been closed for hours. The second-floor apartments were all dark. The street was quiet. Kitty saw a man on the other side of the lot and started walking quicker. This was around 3:20 a.m. Kitty headed towards the side of the building on Austin Street that was lit with street lamps. As she was walking, she heard footsteps behind her, and she began to run.
This is like a nightmare.
Yeah.
This is everyone's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
If you're walking in a parking garage, if you're walking on a street, and it doesn't even have to be dark. It could be in the middle of the day. If you are alone and you hear footsteps behind you, this is worst case scenario.
Because I can't do anything.
Nope.
I got nothing. The best I can do is get away now.
Yes.
I'm in trouble if they catch me.
It doesn't get better. And I think that's one of the reasons why this murder struck so many people, because it's everyone's worst nightmare. So she got to the streetlight in front of the bookstore when Winston grabbed her and stabbed her twice in the back. She screamed, "Oh my God, he stabbed me. Please help me. Please help me." Lights flicked on and windows slid open in the neighborhood. From one of the upper windows of the Mowbray apartments across the street, a man called down, "Let that girl alone," and Winston took off. He retreated towards his white sedan parked up the street. He backed his car into the shadows so people couldn't see him or read his license plate. He took off the stocking cap and put on a fedora hat with a feather, and he waited. He wanted to finish what he started, but he was expecting to hear sirens or see people coming down to tend to Kitty. The neighbors went back to bed, and Kitty stood up. She made her way around the side of the building to get to her apartment. Had she headed in the other direction toward Bailey's, her neighbors would have still been able to see her. But she headed around the other side towards the railroad tracks, and it was dark in the back of the building, so people couldn't see her anymore. And they went to bed. She was about 20 feet from the entrance to her apartment, but she felt like she couldn't make it that far, so she walked into the closer stairwell. And now this is one of those stairwells. The door opens and there's it's not a lobby, but it's like a vestibule. There's like that small entrance on the bottom, and then there's stairs that go up to apartments at the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll post pictures of this area on the Instagram for people to see. No one came outside, so Winston went back to look for Kitty. He thought she may have been in the train station's lobby, but it was empty. The coffee house door was locked. He tried the next door, and he found Kitty on the floor at the foot of the stairs. Despite punctured lungs, Kitty screamed loud enough to alert the neighbor whose apartment door was up the stairs. To stop her from screaming, Winston stabbed her in the larynx. He stabbed her breast so deep he cut 2 of her ribs. He was blindly stabbing her, and she was trying ferociously to defend herself. Carl Ross, the neighbor whose apartment was at the top of the stairs, peeked out and saw Winston on top of Kitty stabbing her. Winston looked up at him, and Carl closed the door. Carl peeked out again, and it was still happening, but he never intervened. Once Kitty stopped moving, Winston raped her. When he couldn't keep his erection, he penetrated her with the knife blade he had used to stab her.
Nope. Ugh.
He orgasmed and then stole the $49 from her wallet before taking off. The crime lasted about 33 minutes, from 3:19 to 3:52 a.m. Kitty's neighbor, Sophia Farrar, heard what happened and found Kitty in the hallway. When she tried to open the door, Kitty's body was in the way. Kitty was still conscious and thrashing, but Sophia was able to get in and calm her down, and she held Kitty as she lay dying. Ugh. Sophia said she could feel the knife wounds in her back and saw that her black leather gloves were all cut up. Kitty did not survive her injuries. At 4:25 a.m., an ambulance arrived for Kitty's body. Police woke Mary Ann to tell her what happened, and Mary Ann went down to the morgue to see Kitty. She sat outside on the bench, and police said, "We're going to take you home now." And Mary Ann was in such shock, she said she needed to wait for Kitty first. Oh. An autopsy performed on Kitty showed that she had been stabbed 13 times. She had 9 stab wounds in front and 4 in the back. And she had suffered a stab wound in her throat. She had several slashes on her right hand, cuts on her fingers from defending herself. They said her stab wounds were oblique and jagged, indicating that she was twisting to defend herself and avoid each stab. Her cause of death was a bilateral pneumothorax, which means that air escaping from Kitty's punctured lungs filled her chest cavity, compressing her lungs and suffocating her.
What an awful... I mean, the entire thing is awful, but what an awful way to die.
Detectives interrogated Mary Ann for 6 hours. And they weren't asking her about the crime or anything like that. They were asking her about her relationship with Kitty.
Of course they were.
And Mary Ann admitted that they were lesbians, which she said she's always regretted because they had no right to that information. Mm-hmm. The police found it relevant because they felt that there was more jealousy in homosexual relationships than in straight relationships, so more chance for violence. But 5 days after the murder, police had no suspects. They'd taken Mary Ann's name off the list, even though they never told her that, and they had no leads, no murder weapon, nothing. Until they crossed paths with Winston Moseley. So I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about Winston Moseley, who is, to put it mildly, a monster. A monster.
I would think so.
Winston Moseley was 29 years old in 1964, so around the same age as Kitty. He worked at a business machine company called Ray Graham, punching data cards. He was married to a woman named Betty and lived with his 2 sons and 5 German Shepherds in South Ozone Park in Queens, which that's a lot of German Shepherds.
It's a lot of dogs, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is. Winston was the only child of Fanny and Alfonso Moseley. His mother described his childhood as blissful. She said he was potty trained at 4 months, which I call bullshit.
Yeah.
And that he could read before he entered the 1st grade. His mother got him involved with painting, poetry, and music. And he was tested later in life and had an IQ of 135, wow, which would classify him as moderately gifted. When Winston was 9 years old, his mother told him that she had a cancerous tumor in her belly and needed surgery. Fanny went to the hospital, but never came home. Oh, she didn't die.
Oh. What?
Where'd she go?
His mother was just sick of her husband and living in Harlem, so she went to the hospital and then left them to go to Michigan.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay.
I can't imagine. I'm laughing. It's not funny at all. I can't imagine that as a child.
No.
Like, and I don't think that he was told that she died. It was just like she went to the hospital.
And that was it.
And she just didn't come back. She abandoned them. His father said he couldn't raise him alone, so he shipped Winston to Michigan to live with his maternal grandmother. And when Winston was around 10, his father told him he wasn't his real father and that he was the product of an extramarital affair, which devastated him.
Yeah, really.
Was that true? We assume? Or
I believe
you
so.
believe it's true? Okay.
Oh.
At the age of 16, Winston lost his virginity to one of his aunts who was bored with her husband.
Oh.
He slept with his aunt on and off for 2 years. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's a great childhood.
No, I would not say blissful.
No.
He was
Blissless.
a maid. He was a maid monster. That's kind of what it sounds like.
When he was around 26, Winston married his wife, Betty, in 1961. They had a son, Mark, the next year. Winston also took in a baby who belonged to Winston's 14-year-old cousin. Betty and Winston planned to adopt the baby as a favor to the family. And Winston's mother actually came back into the picture 2 decades after she left. And Winston not only forgave her, he invited her to move in with him and Betty.
What?
So ignoring how screwed up his childhood is,
Yeah.
like, it sounds like he has it together.
Yep.
Right now. He has a wife and kids. He's got these dogs.
Interesting.
He's got this great life. He forgave his mom.
Yep. Sounds like he's on the right track or like a healing path. You would think like good for this guy. He got his life together.
Right. I didn't write this in my notes, but I did find this very interesting. I don't think that his father helped the situation. So after his mom had moved back to New York, his father would drive around with a handgun, like looking for the mom, and he wanted to protect his dad. So he would go, give me the gun, daddy. I'll take care of mommy for you.
What?
And I don't think he ever meant to actually do anything, but he was trying to protect his father from himself. Again, I don't think the dad helped.
Well, I'm the precedent the father is setting. Well, first of all, like mom abandoned you, so I'm sure that bakes in some issues into you from an early age. But then your dad's on a crusade hunting your mother down. Yeah.
Yeah, not great role models. Not great. So on March 18th, Winston was spotted carrying a TV out of another man's home. When confronted, Winston said he was helping the owner move. He was calm and casual, whistling as he did it. The neighbor called to ask if the owners were moving, and they said no and called the police. So I read 2 accounts of this. One is that the neighbor went to Winston's car and disabled it before returning to his apartment. Winston came back to his car. When it wouldn't start, he just got out and started walking. 2 officers pulled up next to him in response to the call from the neighbor, and the cops frisked him and found a screwdriver in his pocket. They searched his car and found 2 TVs, a few small appliances, and a stack of porn pictures and magazines. He identified himself as Winston Mosley, and the police arrested him. The other version that I heard is that when the neighbor confronted him about what he was doing, Winston took off running. The neighbor tackled him to the ground and held him until the police arrived.
Was that the neighbor's account?
It may have been 2 very different accounts, but
Slightly more heroic on that account.
Yep.
either way, the irony is that Winston was arrested thanks to the actions of neighbors who saw a crime and got involved.
Yep.
That is ironic.
It is very ironic.
You might say they didn't stand by.
They did not. They were not bystanders. The police interviewed Winston. He admitted stealing the TVs and appliances and said he'd done a lot more in the past year. He would bring them to his father's TV repair shop, so his dad would fix them up and sell them. The police asked him about the 30 porn photos and 40 porn magazines, but he said he stole them from an earlier burglary and he'd never buy them himself. He's too good for that.
The irony of that, he's like, yeah, I'm above purchasing these, but stealing,
That's a whole different
that's a whole different ballgame. Let me get in that.
So I guess police had information about a white car that was at the scene of Kitty's murder, and he drives a white vehicle. So they were asking him about it, but they weren't really getting anywhere with it. So while they were questioning him, there were several detectives that joined the interrogation. So the detectives who were interviewing him said that he had an expressionless calm about him that was just freaking people out. Like, just his delivery was concerning. The police noticed he had 2 small scars on his fingers. And when they asked him about it, he said that he had scraped himself around his house. And they were like, we're not buying it. So they pressed him further, and he admitted to killing Kitty.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. That could have been like 6 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically,
Still.
they pressed him on it and he admitted to it.
Okay.
So was he known like having the white car because when he stole the electronics and the appliances, it was a similar white vehicle that they caught him in?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he had that car with him when he was stealing the appliances.
Okay, so he was a known thief in the area that had a vehicle that matched the description that was there when Kitty died.
I just want to clarify, when you say a known thief, they caught him this one time stealing TVs.
But
So
Chloe's
he had no criminal record prior to
Did
this.
he had one after this though, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm trying to think. Is
He
this
never
how,
left the police station.
Okay. Oh wait, this was after he killed Kitty. He stole the TVs.
Yes. So Kitty was murdered
okay.
on March 13th. He was caught stealing the TVs on March 18th.
Okay.
And taken in.
My bad.
And never let go.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm with you now then.
You're good.
I was thinking it was like a pre-existing theft and they were
no.
oh, this guy in the area, this Mosley guy has a white vehicle and he's suspicious. Let's talk to him. Okay.
No, and they sort of took a shot in the dark because all they had to go on was this white vehicle and these scabs on his fingers. Like, I don't really know how they put this together unless they were talking to him and they were like, this guy's so sketchy, he must be a murderer.
Maybe.
He just gave off those vibes.
I guess. I mean, I'll post his mugshot. He does look a little sketchy. But so the detectives wanted details to ensure that it wasn't a false confession. And the detail that confirmed he wasn't lying, he said that Kitty was wearing a menstrual pad because she was on her period. And only Marianne and the chief medical examiner knew that. And he had also mentioned the brown billfold that he stole the money from, which the police had recovered from his employer's parking lot.
There you go.
Okay.
But Winston didn't just confess to Kitty's murder. He also confessed to the murder of Annie Mae Johnson, a young housewife who was 24 at the time of her death. Annie Mae's body was found riddled with puncture wounds and partly burned. Her murder had been unsolved. Winston had parked behind her car when she got home and jumped out, pressing a gun against her stomach. Annie Mae tried to hand Winston her purse, and he shot her. Winston said Annie Mae handed him her keys and asked him to help her get into her house. Winston helped her, then shot her 3 to 4 more times. He then rolled her body into the house where he would rape her. He performed oral sex, then he lay on top of her. He was unable to get an erection and got mad. He covered her body with wadded newspapers, shoved her scarf between her legs, and lit the scarf on fire to make sure her privates burned. Then he went home to his family.
Oh.
And the detectives who were explaining this, he was admitting all of these gruesome details as if he was explaining what he ate for breakfast. Just laid it all out there for him.
I see why he didn't leave the police station
Yeah.
at this point.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes. So police were actually confused at first. They said Annie Mae hadn't been shot, per the coroner. And the cops were screaming that he was lying about this. He was lying about Kitty. They were mad. They said Annie Mae had been stabbed with an ice pick. And Winston basically said, coroner was wrong. I shot her.
Okay. It's like, I was there.
So the police actually exhumed her body, and x-rays confirmed that there were bullets in her stomach, and the coroner had mistaken small caliber bullet wounds for punctures of an ice pick.
Wow.
That's a big mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a coroner, but that seems like
Yeah.
like the main point of your job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think they normally x-ray bodies, but
No.
No,
it's just crazy. But
you don't
I
have
just,
to worry about like extra X-rays at that point.
I just find it so crazy that they were like, you're lying. And then they're like, oh, you just solved that case extra for us.
Yep.
So thank you so much. Winston also admitted to killing Barbara Kralik, who was only 15 at the time. The catch is that somebody already confessed to that murder. Alvin the Monster Mitchell had already confessed to killing Barbara. She had been found alone in her bedroom, stabbed repeatedly, close to death. Before dying at the hospital, she gave a vague description of her attacker, which seemed to resemble Alvin, a troubled teenager who she had known and had visited her often. The police cut off questioning, but it was too late. The Daily News released an article on March 22nd with the headline, "To Admit Same Slaying, Baffle Cops." The assistant DA put the Alvin Mitchell case on hold. So on March 23rd, Abe Rosenthal, city editor for the New York Times, had lunch with the police commissioner, Michael Bull Murphy. Abe wanted to talk about these dual confessions. So Abe casually said, "How about that double confession? What's that all about?" Murphy dodged the question, since a double confession makes the police look bad, and said, "Brother, that Queen story is one for the books. 38 witnesses." He was talking about the Kitty Genovese case. 38? Rosenthal asked. 38, the commissioner said. "I've been in this business a long time, but this beats everything." So the police commissioner was trying to throw off the scent of the news reporters on this double confession by switching it over to the Kitty Genovese story. Just as an aside, regarding the double confession, it's likely that Mosley committed the crime. Mitchell Alvin confessed to the murder of Barbara Kralik after 50 hours of interrogation, and he quickly recanted his confession. His first trial ended in a hung jury, 11 votes for acquittal, 1 for conviction. Winston testified at that trial, admitting to the murder. On retrial, Mitchell was found guilty and served 12 years, 8 months in prison.
Where was Winston during that trial?
Winston refused to testify in the second trial. Alvin insisted on his innocence throughout. And Winston had confessed to her murder with the same certainty he had with the other murders and denied committing another unsolved double homicide. So he wasn't just randomly confessing to crimes. So it was likely that he was the true murderer. And it just blows my mind that the state put on blinders and was like, nope, we've got this case. It's a done deal. We've got a confession, and tried this guy twice. No. I mean, the fact that they went after him again after they had a hung jury, 11 acquittals, because Winston testified that he murdered her, that just I guess it annoys me.
I'm annoyed that they can't use the previous evidence or witness statements.
Right. It's a brand new trial, and he wouldn't testify again.
It's a stupid rule.
Yes. So going back to the information that the police commissioner gave Abe Rosenthal. So their lunches are typically off the record, but Abe basically told him that he wanted to put a reporter on it, and the commissioner agreed to sort of play ball with him. So Abe Rosenthal assigned Martin Gansberg to write an article about Kitty. On March 27th, Kitty's murder got 4 columns on the front page that caught everyone's attention. Part of the article read, "For more than half an hour, 38 respectable, law-abiding citizens in Queens watched a killer stalk and stab a woman in 3 separate attacks in Kew Gardens. Twice the sound of their voices and the sudden glow of their bedroom lights interrupted him and frightened him off. Each time he returned, sought her out, and stabbed her again. Not one person telephoned the police during the assault. One witness called after the woman was dead." Kitty was already 2 weeks old when the story ran, but it was picked up by newspapers all over the world.
Kitty's murder was 2 weeks old, I think.
Yes.
Yep.
She was indeed 2 weeks old. And then some.
Didn't I say Kitty's murder was already...
No, you did not.
Oh, well, Kitty's murder was
Check the
already
tapes.
2 weeks old.
Yep, we got that.
Let's go back.
I am blown away that no one called the police, and I realize that's the point of what we're headed toward talking about. But again, I understand not going out to try to help. What am I going to do? To try to help someone. But boy,
that's what I'm angry about.
Yeah.
Especially the man, Carl, maybe was his name,
Ross,
who opened his door twice and didn't do anything.
We're going to break this down. We're going to break this down because everyone agreed this was Kitty's murder became the symbol for urban apathy. That it's dangerous to live in the city. You're alone. No one's going to help you. No one cares. But the Kew Gardens residents were upset because upon investigation, the Times may have slightly exaggerated the article.
Oh.
So they got this number 38 from the witnesses that were interviewed by police. They think that's where the number came from. The prosecutor, preparing his case, interviewed the witnesses for trial. Of the 38 referenced by police in the Times article, only about 5 or 6 heard and saw enough to know that Kitty was in mortal danger. But let's be honest, even the inaction of 5 or 6 is still disheartening.
Yeah.
It's disheartening. We're going to break it all down,
That's
guys.
terrible. I'm very upset for Kitty.
We're going to break it all down. One of the witnesses, Sam Koshkin, had seen the attack from a 6th floor apartment window. He wanted to call the police, but his wife wouldn't let him. His wife, Marjorie Koshkin, said there must have been 30 calls already. That will be a very important statement. A man named Robert Moser lived on the 7th floor of the Mowbray Apartments, which again, this was this big apartment building across the street that looked down directly onto Austin Street where the first attack occurred. Moser woke up to Kitty's screams between 3:15 and 3:20. He heard her say, help me, and looked out the window to see a man bent over a woman striking her. He figured it was a domestic spat and yelled out, leave that girl alone.
Yeah.
Oh, mm-hmm.
I believe his actual testimony was that he said, hey, get out of there, but that leave that girl alone became like the phrase that he said. He said that Mosley ran away. He watched Kitty stand up and walk to the corner drugstore toward the railroad tracks. Then she wandered around the corner out of sight, and he went back to bed. A woman, Andre Pick, heard Kitty's cries from the 4th floor of the Mowbray Apartments. She looked out the window and she saw Winston run away when Moser yelled out. She stood at her window frozen, and she saw Winston return in a different hat. She tried to call the police, but she was so nervous she was gasping for breath. She couldn't speak. She was very French. She was unsure of her English. She had a heavy French accent, and she freaked out and hung up.
Oh.
She said, I tried.
Was this, and maybe I'll talk about this, was this before the mandatory, isn't there a mandatory callback with 911 calls?
911 did not exist.
Oh, what year? Well,
Yeah.
Kitty's murder was one of the things that spurred the creation of the 911 that we know today.
I will say that changes. I don't think it's acceptable by any means that no one called anything in, but I will say that makes a little bit more sense.
Well, it just changes it a little bit for you, right? Because we know you can dial those 3 numbers and get a dispatcher right away, and help is on the way.
Exactly.
A little different if you have to look up a precinct number, or, you know, they could have dialed 0. Back then you dialed 0, got the operator, you asked for the police, but it wasn't the 911 system that we know today.
Still not acceptable, but that is incredibly interesting. Huh. So definitely before the time of mandatory callback then.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, they didn't have GPS on your cell phone to call you back. No iPhones. No iPhones in 63. 64.
That solved it.
Although the Times article said only one person called the police after Kitty was dead, and although the police logs only showed that one person had called the cops that night, the only call they had logged was Carl Ross. Based upon the interviews, at least 3 people may have called, if not 4. Michael Hoffman was 14 at the time. He lived in an apartment on the 2nd floor of the Mowbray Apartments. Around 3 a.m., he woke to shouting in the streets, and he went to the window and he heard a female crying or moaning. And now they asked him how loud this was, and he said it was one of the loudest things that he had ever heard. Her screams woke him from his dead sleep. So Sam Hoffman, who is Michael's father, came into the room and asked what was happening. And he said, this guy just beat up a lady and ran away. They watched Kitty stagger around the corner drugstore out of sight, looking either drunk or injured. Michael Hoffman's father called the police in case she was hurt badly. So he says, not logged by the police, but again, you know, question their logbooks. He told the police a lady got beat up, and he gave the dispatcher his name, phone number, and address, and then it was over. Kitty was gone, he was tired, and him and his son went back to sleep. Detectives interviewed the Hoffmans, and Sam told the police that had they come when he called, she'd probably still be alive.
Yep, probably.
There was another woman that called the police as well. So she says, Hattie Grund said she called the police because she saw a woman screaming help outside of a laundromat. And she said when she called, the police cut her off and said they had already gotten the call.
Huh. And I was going to say earlier, I mean, Kitty did everything so perfectly right. Like the fact that she had the presence of mind to scream specifically, help, I'm being stabbed, or he's stabbing me, instead of just help or whatever, that I could see people thinking it was a quote unquote domestic, but literally she's saying he's stabbing her. So what else could she have done?
I find it so interesting, and I think this was also in a college sociology course, but they said that if you are in distress or if you're being attacked, to not yell that you're being attacked, probably because of Kitty's case, honestly, that people are less inclined if they feel that they will be in danger as well, and that your best bet is to yell something like fire, because everyone wants to come out and see that and is interested and feel like they can come out and see it without being in danger. So yeah, to not yell something like help, I'm being stabbed, to yell like help, there's a fire, and have people come out, because morbid curiosity outweighs like the danger, the self-preservation instincts. I definitely discussed that in a sociology course. The third person to call the cops was Carl Ross, and the prosecutor called him a sickening man. He was one of two. So we're going to talk about the sickening men right now. Carl had been drinking most of the night. Around 3:30, he heard a noise outside. He heard a woman's voice and cries from below his window. He was skittish and didn't look, hoping it would go away. A few minutes later, Carl got scared by a noise coming from the back of the building. He heard a commotion and a muffled cry. He stood near his door, pacing, wondering what to do, scared. He finally peeked when his curiosity won out, and he saw Kitty laying flat on her back with a man on top of her, stabbing her with a knife. The man looked up at Carl. Carl panicked and closed his door. When the detective spoke to Carl, he tried to downplay his role. He initially told police about the screams he heard on Austin Street, but then he changed his story and said he hadn't heard any noises before he heard the noise in the hallway. He also told police he never saw anyone stabbing her, which the detectives and the prosecutor knew he was lying, because he had called either a friend or a girlfriend, I saw it both ways, before calling the police and told them that Kitty was being attacked. They asked him how he knew it was Kitty if he hadn't seen anything, and he pivoted and said he cracked his door just to listen a little bit. Winston Mosley disagreed with Carl's account. He said he was lying between Kitty's legs and he heard the door open at the top of the stairs. He looked up and saw Carl Ross looking at him. And then he said Carl shut the door quickly, peeked out again, and that was the end of it.
You know, I feel like Winston is the one telling the truth through all of this.
Just like a monotone, a truthful confession about all of it.
I'm going to go with him.
Same.
Yeah. Carl finally admitted that he had heard and seen more than he wanted to. He was drunk and scared of the attacker. He was scared of the knife, scared of the police who would ask him who he was, what he saw, why he sounded drunk. After he had called the girlfriend or the friend, that person that he called said, "Don't get involved." Carl didn't accept that. He called another neighbor, Carol Tarantino, and said he should call the police, but he didn't want them coming to him in his apartment. So Carol said, okay, call from my house. So he had to get there. He didn't want to go out the hallway where Winston was with the knife. So he climbed out his window to the roof and went to Carol's apartment. Carol called another neighbor who called Sophia Farrar, who lived across the hall from Kitty and Marianne. Sophia shouted, "Call the police." Carl finally called at 3:55.
And so, I'm sorry. Sophia is the only person in this like apartment complex that has any lick of sense in her whatsoever. So far, she's like, "Hello,"
and she is the one that ran. They said that she like threw on clothes. She ran out there, not knowing whether like where the killer was, whether he was coming back, and he laid with her while she laid with her while she was dying. Ross's famous quote when they really pushed him and they said, why didn't you call the police sooner? Why didn't you intervene? He said, I didn't want to get involved. And that quote became infamous.
Yep.
Although no one really remembered who said it. Luckily for him.
Yeah.
After being questioned by the prosecution, Ross went home and took a bottle of vodka to Marianne's apartment and drank with her as if nothing happened.
I'm so sorry for your loss that I could have probably prevented, not once, not twice, but on 3 separate occasions.
Right. And I believe that Marianne did not know how much Carl had seen until much later on.
It's awful.
Oh, poor Kitty.
Carl is, I don't want to say innocent. Carl looks better compared to the other guy, whose name was Joseph Fink. Joseph Fink was an assistant superintendent of the Mowbray Apartments. He worked nights and ran the elevator in the building, and his work post gave him a crystal clear view of the Austin Street sidewalk. He told the prosecutor that he saw Winston stab Kitty in the back from about 50 yards away. He could see the knife blade, and he could see that it was shiny. He saw the entire attack. He said he thought about going to get his bat downstairs, but instead he went downstairs where he had a cot, lamp, and telephone, and he went to bed because he'd had a long day. He never called the cops. He went to sleep.
Also, so let's put aside the fact that for another human you can't call the police and help her. Are you not afraid or concerned in the least? Like, I don't think I could sleep well knowing that someone was out there stabbing people.
Right. And I think that's the concerning part. Like, if you were alone and you were on the street and somebody attacked you and you were screaming for help, like, you would hope that someone hears you or calls the police. Yep. Like, that is the baseline of assistance. Just call someone else to help.
Yeah.
I would love if someone would get involved, but I understand if they don't, and just please help me in some way.
Right. And so this guy, they were like, he watched the whole thing and did absolutely nothing. Nothing. At least Carl was drunk. He was scared. He was nervous. Right. He was like, what should I do? Called someone, like, should I call the cops? They were like, no, don't. And then he ended up calling the cops. Joseph was like, I was tired. It was a long day. I could have grabbed my bat, but I didn't feel like it, so I went to bed. How do you just go to sleep after that?
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know. I can't imagine it, because to Laura's point, why would you just automatically assume this was targeted and it was just to attack this one particular person? Like, wouldn't you think, like, oh shit, maybe he saw me because I'm half a football field away from him and he's gonna come over to me next?
I'm also pretty sure if I saw like an animal attack another animal, I would be disturbed enough to not immediately go to sleep.
I will say I literally put down the book that I'm reading on the toy box killer next on my nightstand and then, rolled over and went to sleep last night. So
like a baby.
I don't know if I can totally agree with that.
But you didn't witness the toy box murder.
No, it did paint a picture in my mind, but
a mental picture.
I don't know that I wouldn't get involved. I'm pretty sure
you would get involved.
You would call
I have no
cops.
question.
I would call
100%.
I wouldn't run down there, but I would throw something down and hit him. I would throw something at him.
That's smart. That's good.
This guy was eye level though. He was in the lobby.
Colby's got a bow and arrow.
I don't have a bow and arrow, but I was just thinking like the vases behind Marina, and just throw one of those at him and hit him with it, or just over his head. I don't know. I would get involved, but we discussed this. This is why I will die early at some point in time, but I will die trying.
You'll die a hero, Colby.
Or like she missed it by that much.
So close.
This vase is plastic. Nice try.
Yep.
But so the prosecution interviewed these witnesses, and again, like Carl and Joseph looking real bad among the witnesses, but they didn't want to focus on the neighbors. They didn't want to distract the jury. They only called 5 out of the 38 people who were ear or eye witnesses, and those people did not include Carl Ross or Joseph Fink, for obvious reasons. Winston was charged with burglary and 2 counts of homicide, 1 for Annie Mae Johnson and 1 for Kitty. His trial started on June 8th, 1964, which is crazy to me because Kitty was murdered on March 13th. Yeah. So you're talking less than 3 months after the murder, they've got him to trial. Like, that's not a thing anymore. Yeah. Or that's not a thing in Connecticut anyways. But Winston tried to put on an insanity defense. Basically, he's admitting to these murders. Like, they're trying to say, like, only a madman would admit to these extra murders that he wasn't caught on. And the jury didn't buy it. And they found him guilty.
Good.
The judge said, quote, "I don't believe in capital punishment, but when I see this monster, I wouldn't hesitate to pull the switch myself."
Damn.
That probably wasn't true. So during the penalty phase, the judge would not allow any psychiatric evidence in mitigation of a death sentence. And the judge said that the jury had rejected his insanity defense and found him sane enough to be guilty during the trial, so that ship had sailed. The defense attorney's son believes that the judge was building reversible error into the case. That way, the public would be happy and Mosley could still escape death.
Excuse me?
Yes, please ask your questions.
We have questions.
Yes. Go ahead.
What is it?
Reversible error.
Reversible error. So the reversible error that they were saying he built into the case. So he was actually against the death penalty. He was trying to say that he's for it. This guy's a monster. He's trying to appease the public because the public was so mad. But he made a decision in the case, not allowing the psychiatric evidence, that they're saying he knew would cause a reversal on appeal. So that he came out looking the best in the end. So basically, he told the public, listen, I would pull the switch on this guy if I could. Like, let's sentence him to death. Get him to death. No psychiatric evidence. Screw you. This guy's super guilty. He's totally sane. Knowing that not letting that evidence in, it would get reversed later on. So the guy wouldn't be sentenced to death, but he would be in the newspapers being a capital punishment judge against this defendant.
Gotcha. Without actually doing it.
Without actually doing it.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And that actually is exactly what happened, because in 1967, the New York Court of Appeals ruled that he should have allowed the psychiatric evidence in, and his sentence was commuted from death to life in prison. So the judge got exactly what he wanted. The judge is quoted in the papers as saying, I'll pull the switch myself, but he made this reversible error decision. And, you know, how many people remembered that when the time came?
Just the lawyers.
Yeah, just the nerdy lawyers looking up those articles. So it gets a little wild. So 1967 is when they commuted his sentence. On March 12th, 1968, Winston Mosley told a prison guard that he was experiencing some discomfort. The Attica physician found that Winston had a meat can, like one that holds Spam, 3 inches wide and 1.5 inches high in his rectum.
Mm-hmm. As one does.
Yes, pain. That happens to the best of us.
I see the pain. Yep.
They tried to remove it under general anesthesia inside the prison, but the doctor couldn't get it out and he was bleeding a lot, so they had to send him to a local hospital. In fact, they were like, we don't even know how he got this up there. Like, he would be in excruciating pain.
I'm just trying to think of how one gets a Spam can there. You need a lot of lube. And he was in prison. Where did it come from?
Carefully.
But where did he get the Spam in the first place?
I think you could
from
buy
commissary.
Yeah.
He got the meat can.
There's no
from commissary.
Fat.
Do you think? Do you think the main
may have used the Spam as lube?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
and then I was
cooked
thinking
it, the grease.
Or
I don't even think you need to cook it. I think
just as is.
Yeah.
Guys, can we do our research? Let's go buy a can of Spam from the grocery store.
I'm good.
Really quick.
I'm actually good.
You're good? Okay.
Also, I have some in my closet.
Inquiring
my husband
minds
loves
need
it.
to know.
It's weird. Like a weird thing that my husband likes. But anyways.
Just to be clear, just the Spam.
Just to eat the Spam.
Okay.
The cans are recycled, just to be clear, to be crystal clear. So he was transferred to this local hospital. 6 days after undergoing surgery, he was ready to be transported back to prison. 2 prison guards arrived to bring him back, and an officer brought him to a room to change into his prison uniform when Winston lunged at the guard and took off running out the nearest exit. Winston found an unoccupied house near the hospital to hide out. He found some canned food, a pocket knife, and a .45 caliber revolver.
Oh.
I was reacting at the canned food.
Yeah. He's like, excellent,
joy.
in case I need another escape plan.
Also, like, how sore are you after 6 days of undergoing surgery that you're, like, fighting people off and running as fast as you can?
Yeah. No, and the odds that he'd find an unoccupied house
That has a gun?
Yeah.
Very lucky. Perfect. He was very
lucky.
happy about that.
It's like the Dane Cook when you leave your grocery cart in the store and you're worried someone's going to grab it and come up and be like, jackpot.
This is everything that I needed to buy. Oh my gosh. After 3 days in the house, Winston called an employment service with the house phone and requested that they send a maid.
What? The balls on this guy. He's like, excuse me, this abandoned home that I found, it's filth. Who am I? Not important. This place is disgusting and it's beneath me.
This looks like the place of someone who would purchase porn.
Yeah. Not me. I steal the shit. I would never purchase this.
Much like this house.
Oh my God.
Filth.
Yeah. Well, so he requested the maid for more nefarious reasons.
Oh.
The maid, Zellamore, was sent to the house, and when she went into the house, Winston threatened her with a gun, and then he raped her.
I hate Winston. I'm going to go on
Winston
record.
sucks.
Winston does kind of suck.
He really sucks. He warned her not to tell anyone, and he let her go.
Okay, at least she got to leave.
Yeah.
Did she report it?
So she was too nervous to call the police, so she called the homeowner, whose name was Janet Kulaga. Her parents had lived in the home until her dad passed, and Zella told Janet something funny was going on in the house. Basically said, like, the sheets were weird, like, it looks like someone's living there, something weird is going on, I'm not going back. So Janet, this is March 21st, around 7 a.m., Janet called the police. She said something funny is going on in her house, and she wanted an officer to meet her there. Police told her there was a shift change coming up and to call back at 8:30.
Oh no, did Janet go by herself to the house?
She sure did.
No, Janet.
With her husband, Matthew.
Okay.
Better.
It's not going to... nope, I'm not going to say it's better yet because Marina's face says it may not be.
It still ends poorly.
It still ends poorly.
Do that. Don't do that. Like, what's it matter? Let your house be weird for an hour and a half longer. So... instead of waiting, Janet and her husband, Matthew, go to the house. They enter, and Winston's standing at the top of the stairs, pointing the gun at them. He sits them down. He takes $31 out of Janet's purse and Matthew's wallet, and then he brings them upstairs. He forced Matthew to strip down to his underwear and then gagged and tied him. He led Janet to another room where he gagged and tied her up, raped her, and then left, taking the Kulaga's car. And before he left, he basically like patted Janet on the head and was like, I hope that nobody else ever does this to you. Like, have a great life.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
The Kulagas called the police and ID'd Winston as the man in the house from photos. Winston ended up at another apartment with a woman named Mary Kay Patmos and her 5-month-old child. While he was there with them, another woman, Gladys Costanzo, from a local church nursery, showed up to the apartment, and he dragged her in too. Winston told Gladys to go get him a car because he knew that the Kulaga's car would be tagged. And he said, and if you tell anyone, I will kill Mary and the baby.
Oh.
Gladys left and called her husband when she got to the church, and her husband called the FBI. Within 2 hours, the apartment was surrounded with cops that were all sort of hiding in the bushes and around the building. Gladys returned with a car and put the keys on the roof, but Winston sensed that it was a trap. After a while, the FBI called the Patmos apartment, and Winston let in one agent, Special Agent Welch. While Agent Welch and Mosley were talking, Mary and her baby snuck out the back window. And Mosley was pointing a gun at Welch's head the whole time they were talking. And Welch had a gun in his pocket pointed at Mosley.
Oh, my God.
It's like a movie. It's like a movie.
Insane.
It's a movie.
Also, just a shout out to that cop who literally sacrificed like just his safety and well-being to let them go because he turned the attention to himself.
And somebody asked him, they're like, how did you talk to him for that long? And he said, very carefully.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, insane. They actually talked for about an hour before Winston finally put his gun down and surrendered.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's an excellent hostage negotiator.
Yeah.
Mosley went back to prison in Attica. And then he said he was turning his life around. In 1977, he earned a bachelor's degree in sociology, becoming the first convicted murderer in state history to earn a college degree from his prison cell. And that same year, an op-ed was published in the Times with the headline, quote, I'm a man who wants to be an asset. He claimed credit for bringing attention to an important problem. He said that the crime was tragic, but he was urging members of society to come to the aid of its members in distress or danger. He said it's necessary to sometimes get involved. He said this is a quote, "The man who killed Kitty Genovese in Queens in 1964 is no more. I'm a man who wants to be an asset to society." He sort of left out the part that he then devised a scheme to escape prison, left prison, raped two more people, held people hostage, and then went back. Yeah. Like, he left all that out. Yep. He was just like, I want to be a new man starting now. Like, right now. Right now.
And he's like, I want to be an asset by not doing terrible things. Do you know how you could have been an asset, Winston? You could have been an upstanding member of society.
It's like raping and killing people.
Literally, it's like someone who's trying to sell umbrellas pouring water on your head and being like, you should have had an umbrella.
That's an interesting analogy. Yeah.
I was thinking about it the whole time.
I can dig it. I like it. Thanks. I like it. And he also, he started changing his story. He said that he actually killed Kitty because she cut him off in traffic and was yelling racial slurs at him. So he was trying to, take less responsibility for her murder. And then this one is like an inmate classic. He said that he deserved credit for exercising restraint and for leaving Zella Moore and Janet Kulaga alive after he raped them, because he could have killed them too. But that is that's a classic inmate move. Yep. Like being like, I deserve credit for not committing worse crimes. Like, I only murdered 5 people. That guy killed 20. Like,
yeah, he's so much worse than me.
Right. Like, it doesn't make it any better. Like, it's just congratulations, I guess.
Congratulations. Maybe you can sleep tonight.
Mosley had his first parole hearing in 1984, which was denied. He was denied parole 18 times before his death in March 2016 at 81 years old.
Wow, 2016.
Yeah, which, can you imagine, though, like, thinking that you deserve parole? Like, aside from the murders, I'm not saying, like, people can be reformed and people do make changes in their life, but not only did you murder people, you escaped from prison and committed additional crimes. Not just burglary, not just like breaking and entering, like rape. Like you committed like another more atrocious crimes while you were out. Why would you ever be paroled?
It wasn't like a crime of necessity. Like I broke out of here
stealing
and
cars.
I need things, right, to be able to help my case. This was like opportunity presented itself and he couldn't help it.
No, and he tried to justify it.
I would have killed them.
Right. So, talking about the changes that came from Kitty's murder, we talked about 911. Some sources indicate that Kitty's murder essentially spawned the creation of the 911 system that we know today. The history seems to be a little bit more complex than that, but it seems that was the catalyst that forced action by officials. Because up until the late 1960s, there was no centralized number for people to call in case of an emergency. If someone needed to contact the police or the fire department, they called the nearest station, or they had to dial 0 to reach a telephone operator and then be connected. In 1956, the National Association of Fire Chiefs recommended that cities employ a single number for people to call when disaster struck. And then in 1965, the Times reported that Kitty's case spurred the push from New York police and politicians for this single emergency number. Wow. 3 years later, the Federal Communications Commission and Bell System teamed up and selected 911 as the emergency number, which was announced in January 1968. They chose 911 because they wanted a number that was short, easy to remember, and unique. And 911 had never been used as an area code or service code before. And this is also back when rotary dial telephones were still the primary type of phone. So the shorter the number, the better.
And I'm guessing the 9 because I think the area codes went up. I'm guessing. Don't quote me on that, but I'm guessing. And then, so you hit the 9, but then it's only the 1, so it's quick.
Right. Quicker. Yep.
Wow.
And because of Kitty's case, many states also enacted Good Samaritan laws, which encouraged witnesses to stop crime or to at least to report it. California, Florida, Massachusetts, and 7 other states passed duty to aid laws, obliging citizens to help others in need if they could do it without putting themselves in danger. I think that number's higher now, but I actually don't think that those laws are actually enforced.
How could you? I mean, that's a hard one.
Right. But the most interesting thing, in my opinion, to come from Kitty's murder is it inspired research by psychologists in fields that barely existed in the years prior, specifically urban psychology, social psychology, and the study of pro-social behavior. The most well-known psychological principle that stemmed from Kitty's murder is the bystander effect, which has also been called Genovese syndrome.
Oh.
The bystander effect was first studied and popularized by two sociologists at Ohio State University who conducted a variety of experiments and published a report in 1968 called The Unresponsive Bystander. John Darley and Bibb Latane began their research with smaller, low-risk experiments. They asked random New Yorkers for directions, and they threw frisbees around Grand Central Station. Most bystanders were suspicious and pretended not to notice these individuals, which, I mean, we would too. Mm-hmm. Then they stepped it up. They created scenarios where it appeared that someone who intervened may be at risk for physical injury or death. What they found was that people were more likely to act if there were less bystanders or less perceived bystanders. So the more people around, the less responsibility any one person felt to act.
Can I give a stupid example of this?
You bet.
Email at work. I learned you're not supposed to email like 15 people and be
Nobody
like,
responds.
Hey, can anyone do blah, blah, blah? You put like one or two people or call them out. So that's obviously a very, very stupid example, but it makes me think of that. And then it makes me also think of the fact that you say perceived bystanders. Mm-hmm. So like, I mean, who knows who was awake and who was home in that scenario. But if I'm sitting there, was that called the person who was like the wife, right? Who said
30 other people must have called.
Yep. Wow.
So they also staged a scenario in which a thief went and stole an envelope full of money from a classroom desk. They found that most of the witnesses in the room pretended that nothing had happened. In fact, people that had clearly watched the theft occur specifically said they had not seen anything. In another study, participants were told different things about how many other people were involved in a certain scenario. So participants were alone in a room waiting for instructions, and some were told that there were 4 other participants, 1 other participant, and some were told that they were the only participant. While giving instructions, the instructor pretended to suffer a seizure. The instructor actually said, "I'm gonna die, help." There was an assistant placed in the hallway, so all the people had to do to help the instructor was just walk outside and tell the assistant that someone needed help. For those who were told they were the only participant, 85% told the assistant that the instructor needed help. For those who were told there was 1 other participant, 62% acted. The rate plummeted for those in a group. For those who were told there were 4 other participants, only 31% acted.
What's the reasoning in this scenario? There's no danger to you as the participant. Why wouldn't you act?
What are you doing? Sitting there watching? I mean, you're not like in your apartment closing your shades and by yourself. You're in the same room, right?
Well, so I think it's over a speaker, so you can't see the instructor. You're hearing it come in.
Because I think that distancing is very important.
But again, it's the distribution of responsibility. In people's minds, they think, well, there's 4 other participants. Somebody else must have told them.
I do happen to think that Colby and I, and you as well, are built a little differently. But I cannot fathom, in that email example or in the reporting example, I'd be like, hey, you might have already, we get now yet another, apparently too many work examples, but, and another stupid one. But if somebody makes a mistake in an email or a mistake on a meeting, I'll send a note and say, hey, you probably got this from 40 other people, but just letting you know. And that's an email mistake. So it's just amazing to me. I know it's fact. I've heard about this, but I can't. I'd love to believe I'm different. I don't know if that's true. But.
I would love to believe I'm different as well, and I will give you a real life example. I was driving home on I-84. There was a car stopped on the side of the road, like almost like inching into the lane, but not really. They were still sort of in the shoulder. And people were slowing down, and all of a sudden, like, a hat flies out the window. The door opens, and two guys roll out into the
travel lane.
The
breakdown lane.
Nope. Fast lane.
Oh,
fast lane.
Oh, you're all the way on the left.
Yeah, all the way on the left.
Oh.
Sorry, all the way on the left. They roll into the fast lane on the left hand side, and they are beating the shit out of each other. And people are swerving around, trying not to hit them, and there are other people there. And I'm like, oh my God, should I call the cops? And I'm like, 100 other people must have called already, right? So I'm knowing that it's not the state police. I feel weird calling 911 because I'm like, is it a true emergency? Like, is that weird? They're going to ask me who I am, where I am. I'm like, I don't know if I looked at the mile marker, like, So I did look up the state police, like, barracks number to call a number versus 911, which in hindsight, I probably just should have called 911 because there are people fist fighting in the middle of I-84.
Yeah.
Tried calling the barracks number. I got an automated message, pick these options, couldn't get anybody. I was like in Farmington, and I was like, I tried. I'm like, somebody else must have called.
Yep.
I tried. They must be done fighting at this point. Like, that is the Kitty Genovese murder.
I am built differently because I did call 911 in a situation like that. I was driving into work late one day, like maybe it was 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and somebody had rolled over on the highway a little ways. It was 84 as well, heading into Hartford, and somebody had rolled over, and I saw multiple other cars like veer off the road, and I saw people get out of the cars and run over to them. So I was like, I'm not going to get out because these people are going to pull them out. I'm going to call 911. So I called. They didn't give a shit who I was. They just said like, where are you on the highway? Like, is anybody hurt? And I was like, I'm shaking. I didn't even see it happen. Like, this person's definitely upside down in their vehicle. 84 eastbound. I just passed exit like 33 or something like that. I don't know. I think they go up in that direction, right? So I did, but I don't know what happened to that person. That's what's wrong with me, is I want to know like the follow up of it.
I feel like I'm somewhere in between both of you, because I remember it was when I was like 17. I had just gotten my license, and it was back in New Hampshire, and I had come around a corner, and there was a car pulled over and a motorcycle on its side and a person on the road. And so I do an assessment and figure out, like, has somebody else, can I see, like, if I see someone pulled over and I see them on a cell phone, I'm like, they're good, they're fine.
Calling.
If I see, now again, when I see other people, I'm like, all right, they literally have pulled over, they're with them, they're fine. So this one, nobody else had pulled over. I pulled over at the same time as someone else, and the other person called 911, but I had pulled over, and then I was like, I guess I have nothing to do. I didn't see it. I mean, I didn't see the accident. I didn't see anything, but I'm somewhere in between, because but it does make it like, if I have assessed, so it's almost the perceived bystander. If I've assessed that other people have done it, and I could for sure be wrong, then I think that I'm fine and I don't need to do anything. So it's so fascinating.
I think that I am so paranoid that it would happen to me and nobody would call or report it, that I am like going the extra mile, because if I were in that situation, I would want somebody to say it.
I will say for sure after this, the police are going to be like, you need to chill. The person was going through the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru.
They're going to be like, Laura, everything is fine. They live here.
It's like I tell my dogs, it's not your yard.
Oh my gosh.
Relax. I do think it's hard though, because I'm reflecting on every weird experience I've ever experienced and trying to figure out if I should have called 911. And my husband and I were going to dinner the other night, and we pulled out onto the main road near us, and we saw a man. Now, people walk down that road, but not frequently, and there aren't sidewalks there. It's not a pedestrian road. And there was a man walking on the side, like he wasn't in the road, but he was definitely like kind of struggling. Like, we kind of assumed he was drunk. And now I'm reflecting, like, now it's not a super fast road. It's fast, but like, you know, he wasn't in the road, but there was something wrong. Where's the line? Like, I don't think I should have called. Obviously I didn't, but now I'm questioning everything.
But these studies, I mean, you're not talking about close calls in these studies.
Okay,
like,
true.
People are saying help me, I'm dying.
Yeah. Okay.
And then people are like, no, somebody else called. Nah, they're called.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
you should feel okay about
All right.
not calling about a random drunk person. The drunk person would be like, bruh.
Well, that's
really?
again, that's literally what I think. I don't know. But I'm with you, Colby. Like, I think, what if, I mean, not in that scenario. Hopefully I'm not drunk walking down the road, but I would hope that someone would err on the side of, I should help this person.
Yeah.
This is a scary topic.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's hard.
It's not great. And now we're in a different era too, where if you do need help, you're going to be nervous as to who pulls over to help you.
Yeah.
Or who comes out to help you.
Yep.
I mean, that's like a whole nother level of terror.
To that point, I saw, again, 84. Just really we should take other roads. But it was coming out of Hartford, so there's a lot of there's not a big breakdown lane where I was, and a car was pulled over and stopped with its hazards, and then we're in traffic, so I'm going slowly. And I drove past that, and I see a woman walking, and I thought to myself, geez, I was all the way in the left lane, so I couldn't really get over anyway. But I was thinking, like, man, that's a really scary, like, we weren't going that fast on the highway, but that's scary. She probably ran out of gas. Yep. She's probably walking to the next exit, which is not a great spot, and I thought ever so briefly to myself, geez, I should see if I can make my way over and see if she needs a ride. And then I thought to myself, what I can't risk.
Yeah.
What if it's somebody who could take advantage of me or harm me or some crazy thing. It's all a scheme and they have someone waiting. And unfortunately, that's what you think. And that's, maybe this is why all the murders happened in the 60s and 70s. Just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we should be careful and cautious.
I don't know that I would have let that person into my car either. I probably would have just called somebody and not inserted myself into harm's way.
And what's funny is that person probably would have been like, no, thank you.
No, thank you.
You're a murderer.
Yes, exactly.
They would have thought you're a murderer.
And
you're
you're
like, this super sketchy woman pulled over and tried to pick me up, and it was so weird.
Good point. I didn't even think of that. Oh, because here I'm like, I'm not a murderer. I know.
You know that.
I will say I would be much more comfortable if it was a woman, because women tend not to commit violent crimes against people that they don't know. We tend to be very vindictive against those that we do know who have wronged us. So I'd feel more comfortable doing it for a woman than a man, any age, any race. Women commit not violent crimes against those that they don't know. So I could probably take her.
You could.
That's what they want you to think.
And
we get away with
partner.
It.
Yeah,
we get away with it more. That's the thing.
We're just that good.
Yeah.
We've gone off the rails here.
Yes.
What are we talking?
Bring us back to Kitty.
We're talking about the sociology studies.
Yes.
So what this study found is that basically the fact that there were so many, quote, witnesses to Kitty's murder actually worked against her and was a bad thing. Darley and Latane found that if one person sees trouble, he'll feel all the guilt for not acting.
Yep.
But if others are present, responsibility is diffused and the finger of blame points less directly at any one person.
So true. Applies to the email example too. Like nobody else responded.
Yep. And the question here, which we've sort of discussed, is have we learned, now that we've identified the bystander effect and can self-reflect on this study, have more people taken action? Kevin Cook's book gave some disturbing examples that say absolutely not.
Oh, I knew it.
In 1984, Cheryl Araujo was gang raped in a bar while others watched. In 2008, Angel Torres was run over by a car in Hartford, Connecticut, and ignored by scores of drivers and bystanders, some of whom told police that they essentially didn't want to get involved. 2-year-old Axel Cassian was stomped to death by his father trying to get the demons out, while a crowd in California looked on, including a fire chief. The dad even left mid-attack to go turn on the hazard lights on his truck, and no one helped the boy at all. The fire chief's fiance finally called 911, and the father was shot in the head, but the boy was already dead by that time.
Oh my God.
A woman named Esmond Green collapsed in an ER waiting room at a hospital in Brooklyn. She'd been dying on the waiting room floor for more than an hour, and hospital staff walking by ignored her presence.
That one's inexcusable.
I know that these are facts, and I cannot believe them. I can't believe it.
I know. But I mean, would you believe Kitty Genovese that somebody opened the door, saw her being stabbed and just closed the door?
No.
And panicked and
I
took
can
their
understand
time
the panic, but it was just, wow.
Yep. A 15-year-old California schoolgirl was gang raped during homecoming while other students watched. And Hugo Tail Yax of Queens was stabbed in the chest while saving a woman from a knife-wielding thug in 2010. And he was bleeding to death while pedestrians walked by, one pausing to snap a cell phone photo.
That's what I'm more afraid of these days.
My thought is, unfortunately, now that everyone has a cell phone, I actually think that someone is more likely to pull out their phone and film a crime for TikTok or Instagram before calling the police, which I believe is the present day urban apathy.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly. Have you seen that Black Mirror episode where I'm gonna have to look up the episode, but it's the one where they're all videoing and watching on their phones.
Oh, is it White Deer?
I think
that's
so.
the only one I've ever watched, and I thought it was so messed up.
But it's so, I love those.
It was
episodes.
great at the end when they dropped the twist.
Yeah. So go watch that one because it's exactly what we're talking about.
But I really think that that's true in the most disturbing way. I was trying to think of if Kitty Genovese happened today, and I really can imagine all of the photos posted to social media, all the videos of him stabbing her and running away, and her, maybe somebody calls 911, but how many people whip out their phones to take a video first?
More than call 911 for sure.
Yeah. And video it first. I mean, like, we see videos all the time, and my husband's like, why are you recording this? Like, shouldn't you be on the phone with the police? Like, it's...
And I think the underlying, besides the whole likes and the grip that social media has on us, it is ultimately the bystander effect, because someone else is going to come in and do it. Someone else will take care of it.
Right. I'm recording it for the police. Somebody else is calling 911, I'm sure.
Wow.
So that was Kitty Genovese.
And speaking of Instagram, I'm just kidding.
Speaking of the grip that social media has on people.
Oh, that was good, though. That was good.
Thank you. Guys, if you are enjoying listening to Grim, please rate and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you don't miss any episodes. We love all the love and support. It keeps us going, guys. Makes our day. You don't even know. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. Laura's dancing. Looks like she wants to say something. No?
No, I like the end of it. You just have a nice ring to the platforms. That's all. I was dancing to it.
Follow us on Instagram at Grim Crime Podcast for information on future episodes and case photos. If you want to send us a case suggestion or just say hi, which shout out to our listener who emailed us a book suggestion. We love you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
You made our day.
Yes.
From South Africa. You can email us at grimcrimepodcast@gmail.com and listen, learn, and stay alive. Until next time, Gremlins, we love you.
Bye.